Welcome, everyone, to the Valley of the Sun.
What a challenge tonight with this Suns roster and all the offensive weapons they have.
Precious will dribble it up the court and throw it in, coast to coast. Deep three. His name is Freddie All-Star.
When you're on the road, you stay together, you keep fighting.
Fred sends it to Trent Jr. The three. Got it. He's made 8 threes. Barnes now. Scotty B to the rim. Good night, Phoenix. Toronto wins it. There are tough back-to-backs. This is about as tough as it gets. Scotty B takes it away. Boucher. Let it fly. Siakam now running. Finding Thaddeus Young. Oh, it's beautiful. How impressive is this W? Good night, Denver.
It may have been the Raptors' 2 most impressive wins of the season because of the variance in the wins. Think of beating the NBA's best team in their building, where they were 28-7 on the season, and then followed it up by beating the reigning MVP and the Nuggets at altitude, second half of back-to-backs without Freddie VanVleet. Yeah, the Suns were missing Chris Paul, but that's the same Suns team that just smacked the Lakers by 29 at home, putting up a crisp $140 on Los Angeles. So tonight on Sportsnet and Sportsnet 1, it is the 37-30 Raptors headed in to face the 29-38 Lakers. I mean, ponder that for a moment. The Raptors are a full 8 games up on LeBron and company, with less than 20 to play for both. It speaks to the culture that Toronto has built. Now, before you go talking about, but the Lakers have been injured, consider this. LeBron, AD, and Russ have missed a grand total of 48 games this season. The Raptors' big three, Freddie, Pascal, and OG, have missed a grand total of 49, one more than the Lakers' big three. The whole sports world talks about building the right culture. The Raptors have actually achieved it. They play with heart, they play with soul almost every night, and it has already been passed from DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry to Fred VanVleet and, dare we say, Pascal Siakam. Even up after the ups and downs and all the criticism that he has taken, he may just have blossomed into an all-NBA dude. So here the Raptors are with 15 games to play, already surpassing Vegas's win total of 36 for the entire year yet again. That's 10 of the last 11 seasons the Raptors have hit the over in the expected win total. It is jaw-dropping for those who aren't paying attention and ho-hum for the hardcores. But it shouldn't be. That doesn't mean that they are making a run or even winning a playoff series, but it damn well should be appreciated in the moment. Just look at last year or the very same Lakers they face tonight to see how tough it can be. And yet, here are the Raptors doing it over and over and over and over and over. Shout out Marshawn Lynch. And shout out Blake Murphy of the Fan Morning Show, sportsnet.ca, who joins me now to explain or help explain. Welcome back, Blake. How are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm well. So, I wanted people to kind of sit back and understand what the Raptors are doing yet again. And I thought the Lakers are a wonderful comparison for just how tough it can be year in and year out to do it. And the Raptors this year, yet again, hitting, as I saw on your Twitter over the weekend, that over-expected win total in Vegas, 10 of the last 11 seasons. That's culture, is it not?
I think that's a big part of it for sure. And the early part of that streak, and look, this is not a streak that happens often. It's pretty much unprecedented for a team to this consistently hit the market expectation. I would say early on in that streak, there's a little bit of, maybe people didn't believe in the Kyle DeMar Raptors, or there was a little bit of, Toronto being undersold or whatever. I think the last 5 or 6 years of this is definitely a culture thing. And it's definitely, there have been years where it's a depth thing. There have been years where it's a young guy stepping up thing. There have been years where it's, hey, everything just kind of clicks, like that 2019-2020 run it back year. The expectations were all over the place. Will they blow it up? Will they not blow it up?
Right.
So they them consistently beating this every year except the Tampa year, like eventually this streak is going to end, but I don't know how you bet against them hitting the over-under anytime soon.
Anyone who watches this show knows that we brought this up to Nick Nurse and Bobby Webster on Raptors Media Day before the season started, and like it was a thing. They knew exactly what I was speaking of when I brought up 36.5 wins. They knew what they had done in the previous years. Who gets the most credit for this run? Is it Masai Ujiri just because he's been around for most of it? Is it Dwayne Casey for setting that culture? Like, I remember talking to him when I had a podcast with Sid back at the Score, and he came in and he was saying, we're going to change the culture. And I said, hold on, coach. Like,
down the rock.
Yeah, how many times have I heard this story before about changing the culture? And he brought the rock, they pounded the rock, and he did help change that culture. Who do you think deserves the most credit for this?
Yeah, it's definitely a shared thing. You can go through the coaches, the front office, the players, the excellent Raptors media, who obviously nudged them in the right direction with things. Anytime you have a streak like this, it's a little bit of everything. I do think, though, the culture piece is real, where they've, not only have they tried consistently to identify players who might be undervalued, they've tried to identify personalities who thrive in that sort of system, right? I remember back to the Norman Powell draft, and one of the reasons they liked him was that he profiled personality-wise as a guy who, if he's out of the rotation or he has to go down to the G League, he's going to use that as fuel. He's not going to let that shake his confidence. That's not going to cause him to withdraw. And those things are imperfect. It's not an exact science with those things. But I do think that example and the Fred VanVleet example speak to, hey, not only is this a team that puts together rosters that are better than you might think, but they also instill that culture of, it's a good thing that people only think you're going to win 36 games, right? You can catch people sleeping a little bit. You can wear that chip on your shoulder. It's whiteboard material, all that stuff that, you mentioned Dwayne Casey, DeMar DeRozan, a huge component of setting that culture as well. And Kyle Lowry a little later, the prove 'em, the understand the grind, all that stuff. It can seem a little hokey in isolation at times, but you add all those things together, and that's the consistent message. Like, imagine you're a rookie. Imagine you're Justin Champagnie, and you come in as an undrafted free agent to this program in the summer, and you see Fred VanVleet, literally only the 4th undrafted player ever to make the All-Star game, and he's there, and he's the example setter. How do you not fall in line and buy into the culture?
Correct.
At that point?
I firmly believe it, and I believe the same thing happened in San Antonio when you're just so happened that your best players were also hard workers. Like, when you play with Tim Duncan and David Robinson, how can you not work your ass off when you look at those two guys and do what they do? And I think that you can go back in history outside of the remarkably and generational talents. And Jordan was both a generational talent and a guy that worked his ass off. I think, like, when you set that culture, it's hard to walk off, because I think the Raptors are a perfect example of hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. There's a bunch of teams that have been in the lottery every year grabbing all these guys who you and I look at and go, this guy could change your team, and they don't.
Look at the Sacramento Kings and the New York Knicks. Every time they get a stitch of momentum, it's either the front office sees the next shiny thing and pivots off, or the culture erodes, and there's a whole bunch of different coaches that come through. I even think you look at the Golden State Warriors kind of dynasty that they've had, and they've had a lot of stuff break right for them. The 2016 cap explosion at the right time. They pass on Draymond for Festus Ezeli, and then Draymond's there with their second round pick. They've had some good fortune, but that's also a franchise that's built a culture around, hey, Steph is this tiny little guy who people are doubting and doesn't have good ankles, and then suddenly he can deadlift 450 and is, a pretty strong and tough guy, and you have that buy-in defensively as well. I think the Memphis Grizzlies are a great example of a team that's kind of seeing the returns of that culture building from the last few years now, and it's turning into actual success. And you hope that carries through to, as guys get paid and you bring in new guys, that can kind of snowball from there and keep meaning good things. But the Cleveland Cavaliers are another team that a lot of what the rebuild's been about has been about resetting that post LeBron culture. So I think it's a tough thing to grasp. It's a tough thing to touch. But it's kind of one of those things you know it when you feel it. And the Raptors are a great example of that.
And you better do it in a small market. A lot of people were trying to figure out what the last couple weeks or week was, but is that just the margins being that thin for the like I went on Nick Nurse in the minutes and how much he played these minutes, and these guys were getting hurt because of the minutes, and I might have to take that back. Like I might have to circle back on that one because the margins just seem like they're that thin where you lose to bad teams and then you go and get the 2 wins that you just got when you got your guys back.
Yeah, it's tough. The minutes thing, minutes is the only data point we see. We don't get to see some of the sports science stuff that they look at.
Yep.
But anytime you have multiple guys in the top 10, it's going to stand out, right? Even if you're just looking at it from a fascination standpoint. I'd also say that maybe in terms of projecting the Raptors forward, you have to keep in mind that they play their guys so much because in the postseason, other teams are going to start to play their stars more. So maybe other teams get a little boost in the postseason that the Raptors don't get because they do play a 7 or 8 man rotation so often, but the margins are slim. And it's funny, the Raptors have almost as good a record against the league's top 10 teams at 11-12 as they do against the bottom 10 teams at 11-10. They're 25th in the league against the worst teams in the league and top 10 against that middle tier of the league and the top tier of the league. So it's not just this week. It's not an anecdotal thing. This has been an all season thing. And I don't know, I can explain some of you lock in better on defense against a tough opponent and the star stopping stuff they try to do defensively just works better against a star. I don't have an explanation for why they can't hit threes against bad teams. That's not an effort or attention to detail thing. That's mostly just a random thing. And maybe, who knows, maybe Gary Trent's cold streak had a lot of bad opponents in it and Fred VanVleet's absences have, but that one's a little tougher to explain why they can't shoot against the Detroits and Orlandos.
That's one of those head scratchers. While I'm scratching my head, can you tell me what the hell's wrong with the Lakers?
Nope. I mean, look, we just talked about the culture piece that small markets have used to build, right? And the Lakers don't have to do that because there's this level of Lakers exceptionalism. And to be honest, guys want to go there, right? Like it's never going to be tough for the Lakers if they're semi-competent to draw more guys in. But you look at the history of what has worked around LeBron and you try to project ahead of what might work with LeBron as he ages. And they didn't check those boxes. They went old over young with the exception of like Malik Monk and Talen Horton-Tucker. They went kind of non-shooting over shooting. They went big over small and all these decisions that maybe LeBron had a hand in. Sure, maybe he wanted Melo and he wanted Russ and he wanted, a center alongside Anthony Davis so he can play the 3. But the evidence for a long time has suggested that's not the best way to surround LeBron James. So you talk about culture helping these smaller teams at the margins. It's also hurt the Lakers at the margins. And now, honestly, beyond the margins, they're going to have to win 2 play-in games just to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's crazy. LeBron, the player, much better than LeBron, the GM. I would agree with you. I will say this, Kendrick Nunn, I'm not going to say that he's a great player, but he was a part of what they were trying to. You're shaking your head at me.
Sure, but if you're saying that things went awry because Kendrick Nunn didn't play, I think that speaks to a larger issue there.
Right, but it might put them in 7th or 6th or somewhere where they weren't just battling to get into the playoffs. Blake, love talking basketball with you. Thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Enjoy March Madness.
You too. A lot of Canadians. Shout out Ben Mathurin, by the way. About to get all the love that he should have gotten for the last year since he played for Canada. Thanks, Blake.
Thanks, Tim.
And by the way, lots of Canadians on significant teams, 1 seeds with Canadians. Benedict Mathurin, Arizona. The guy's got a lottery pick. It's going to be fun. Time for one last break. We'll check in with Ron Tara, head of Rogers Hometown Hockey. Plus, get you tip of the cap and last call if we have time. Last call is next. Ron Tara next.